It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good Saturday afternoon. Hope you're having a great Saturday. It's been a cold week for sure, so warming up is always a nice event for the weekend, but glad to have you joining us here today on 101.1 FM The Answer and joining us Facebook Live. Glad to see you there and for the Kim Hammer Show. We're going to get right into it today because I've got two distinguished guests that are on today. My first guest is, and I've always been told that once you're a senator, you're always a senator.
That's what I've heard.
Yep. So Senator Eddie Joe Williams, who is running for the Secretary of State position, and then we'll have Secretary of State John Thurston on the second half of the Kim Hammer Show hour, but wanted to get started with Eddie Joe here. So Eddie Joe, what I like to do is just give those that are running for office that I interview an opportunity to just tell a little bit about yourself in case somebody doesn't know you. They can get familiar with your background. You can talk about your family. We'll get into your qualifications and about your history, but from a personal perspective, what would you like the voters of Arkansas, because you are running a statewide race, what would you like the voters of Arkansas to know about Eddie Joe Williams?
Well, I found out that the state of Arkansas is much larger than I thought. I spend every day from one side of this state to the other. But about me, a little bit about me, I spent, for retirement purposes, almost 40 years on the railroad. So I have been a citizen legislator, if you would. A little bit about my family. I have 4 daughters. We're so blessed. They've all done well, professional people. I've been married to my lovely wife, Delana. Next month will be 49 years.
That's great.
And so blessed. I share with people it's a worthless piece of information, but we knew each other 2 weeks and got married 2 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
And we're still working on that. We're still working on our relationship. Maybe it'll work.
You catch her in a weak moment or what, man?
No, it was all her. Yeah.
Oh,
right.
she pursued you,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Next
let me
time I see her, I'm
let me
gonna ask
straighten
her
that
about
up.
that.
But
Yeah,
let me
you get it
straighten
right
that-
now, buddy.
Let me
You just
straight-
lost a boat.
You know her. You know her very well. No, we just fell in love, and we really didn't know what love was in a month. But we've sure grown together almost 50 years.
That's right.
And obviously, our faith is our foundation. That's what we raised our families on.
You are
Yeah.
big in faith. Let me go there for a minute. You got a pretty deep faith background. Go ahead and talk about that a little bit as you continue your thoughts.
No question about that. Raised in church. I ask my kids if they know what a pallet is. They don't have a clue. I said, that's where you go to church and they put a quilt underneath the pew and kids sleep because church would run late. But no, church has been a big part of my life, and not just the building church, but serving the Lord. It's who I am, and I continue to do that today. There's several outreaches that I'm involved in, and we may want to talk about that in a little bit. But along with those 4 daughters and 49 years of marriage, I have 11 grandkids. They're all big deals, and for that I'm thankful. We hunt and fish a lot together, and it makes a big difference. I first ran for office as city councilman in Cabot, Arkansas. I served 3 terms. In my 3rd term, my dad had dementia, and I resigned and helped take care of him. Matter of fact, I moved in with him to help take care of them for several years. And then as I continued to work for the railroad, and then at some point I decided I'd run for the mayor. I was elected. I think there was 5 in the race, and we won it without a runoff. Served 4 years. Senator Glover retired, ran for the Senate. I was elected 3 times in the Senate, of which I'm very grateful to the people of Central Arkansas. And into my 3rd term, I got a call from the White House and asked me if I was interested in serving the president. Well, him and I had met.
Qualify which president.
I'm sorry, President Trump.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, President.
Might matter.
Thank you.
It might matter.
Thank you. It could. So I was very thankful, and let me turn this phone off. Very thankful, and it was an honor to privilege to work for the president for 3.5 years. My focus was on the energy in the southern part of the United States. I covered 16 states, including the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. First year I was on the job, spending an inordinate amount of time in Puerto Rico with the storms and so forth. So it's been a great run. I came back from D.C. I'll never forget, I was looking in the mirror. It was in January, and obviously he had lost and come back, and I thought I'd retire. I've been blessed. Spent, like I say, for retirement purposes, almost 40 years on the railroad, and had a great retirement. But I knew there was some unfinished business, so to speak. There were some things I needed to do, and I had watched the Secretary of State's race, and there were some things going on that caused me concern. I think when we elect, people as Republicans, that they should govern like Republicans. Their office should be ran as a Republican. We have a mandate, and sometimes over time we get complacent in our jobs, and we begin to think of it as it's just a job, it's a placeholder, and that's not who I am. I'm the guy who starts early, stays late every day. I proved that in the Senate for 8 years. I spent time with you. You were on the other end of the House. But I was the first Republican majority leader ever elected in the state Senate since Reconstruction. And that was a reason for that. That was one reason I got to meet Mr. Trump. He's seen my hard work in building a party in the state of Arkansas, a conservative party. And so he knew, him and I thought a lot alike. We were business people. I don't really call myself a politician as much as I do it like a blue-collar politician, because I'm a hard-working, hard-charging kind of guy. And so he picked me up, and it was a direct appointment. It was an honor of my life. I'll say this, we did a great job working on energy issues. We've seen them just plummet, the cost of energy during his administration. There was a reason for that. And we've abandoned all those principles, and you can see what's happening today. The thing that concerns me most, and I look at you sitting across here, Senator, it probably doesn't make a big difference between $1.60 and $2.60 or $3 a gallon of gas for us. We're going to continue to work and drive and do the things we want to do. It irritates me.
Yeah, it's money out of my pocket.
But what about the single?
It's unnecessary money out of my pocket.
What about the single mom that's just making ends meet, that likes to take their 2 kids out, maybe raising them by herself, would like to go out for pizza on Friday night or Saturday night? Well, that $40 or $50 more a week will keep her from doing that. So those are the ones that concerns me the most. And I've always governed like a Republican, and I believe in smaller government. I wrote the bill to authorize the governor to reorganize state government. We took it from 40-plus agencies down to, I think there was 12 or 13. I wanted 7. I wanted it smaller. I still think there's opportunity. I'm going to challenge Sarah to engage me to continue to reduce the size of state government. As you know, it continues to grow every year. State government, people don't realize any kind of government budget, it's about 80% is labor. We don't produce anything in the state, so to speak. We really don't. It's just labor. So you have to be really aware of the number of employees that you've got. So the Secretary of State chose not to go through that process of reorganizing his office, at least restructuring, looking at taking it a hard look. It's continued to grow. I know someone asked him here a while back how many employees he had. I think he said about 140. Well, he's sorely wrong. It's 156, I think. I looked on the website last night, bumping 160, and it was 130 or so when he took office. It continues to grow. With technology, it should actually be shrinking. And so I'm ready to climb in the saddle, so to speak, take a hard look at every function that's performed, and do our very best to limit, if not reduce, the size of state government, especially the Secretary of State's office. I can sit here and give you a whole show on things I did as a senator to reduce the size of state government. It was I'm a little overdressed today. It's because I went to a funeral this morning. A friend of mine lost his son. But I was thinking as I was driving back, I collapsed. I think there were 7 boards. If you pass away, you have to pass through 7 boards before they ever bury you, from the Embalmers Board, Perpetual Care Board, Directors Board,
Health Department,
Health Department's Board, all these things you had to go through just because you passed away. And each one of those was costing money, and not to mention just the paperwork and the rituals that you had to go through. So I collapsed all those, and we have one today. That's just an example of things that I look at, and that's kind of the way I operate. So it is an honor to run for Secretary of State. I know someone asked me the other day, what my first day on the job, what would I do? And I was pretty honest. I said, I'll go to work. I've had people watching the Capitol now for several months, and And I challenged John, the Secretary of State, to go ahead and pull his ID badge and see how often he comes to work. It looks about 2 to 3 days a month sometimes. And that's not who I am. I will start early, stay late, and I'll commit to the people of Arkansas. I'll be the first one there and the last one to leave it. I did it when I was a senator. I tell people I'm maybe a little slower than everybody else. I have to read it twice. I have to study hard, but nobody will outwork me. So I promise you this, I'll go to work every day, unless I'm on vacation, maybe entitled a couple a year. I will hire people that think like me. I know been a big upheaval in the office of the Secretary of State's office about hiring people that don't share conservative views. I know that for a fact. I can't tell you the people who have called me from the Secretary of State's office and said this is upside down. We've got people, that works up here that we don't know what party they belong to, but they're certainly not conservatives. I commit to you and your audience that we will run it as a conservative organization.
All right. Let me ask you on that point. I want to back up. We're going to get back on track.
It's okay.
But I want to back up because I want to ask you something. It's not every day you get to interview somebody that actually worked for President Trump and got, appointed as you did.
Right.
Give me a couple minutes of what it was like to work for President Trump.
Very unpredictable. Every day was a new day. But the first time I met him, I was invited to introduce him in Washington, D.C., when I was a sitting senator, when we had flipped both houses. And I had, in the Senate I can't tell you the number of sitting senators today that I recruited, raised money for, helped them along the way, and helped them get elected. So on a national level, people begin to pay attention to that because we were one of the first states to flip both houses relatively quickly. And so there was an organization in D.C. that had a conservative organization. They had asked Mr. Trump to speak, and they asked me to introduce him. And I said, if you'll write the introduction, I think I can read that, because I didn't know Mr. Trump from Adam. Long story short, I get up, I meet Mr. Trump, incredibly personable person. I was just shocked to find out how personable he was. And we were a very thick guy, a little overpowering because he gets in close to you. But again, just a great, and he wants to know more about you than he does himself. He will ask you a lot of probing questions. So I get up there and they give me the introduction on a piece of paper. And they said, here's your introduction. I think that's exactly what I asked for, because I said, I can't write it. The funny part was I couldn't read it. There was long, convoluted words. It was disjointed. I'm thinking, I can't do this. So I read it briefly, and I said, ma'am, get someone else. She said, oh, no, you're at the head table, and you're on the program. You're going to introduce Mr. Trump. I said, ma'am, you don't know me very well, but I'm not reading this, and I'm giving you fair warning. Here it is. Get someone else. She said, no. I said, okay, I'm going to do what I said I wouldn't do. I'm going to go upstairs, and I'm going to write my introduction to Mr. Trump. And everybody looked at me like, you've lost your mind. And I'm 30 minutes out from meeting him and going on the stage with about 1,000 people. So I get up there, and I scribble it on a napkin. Still got some of those notes.
Sound like Abraham Lincoln on the train. But anyway.
Anyway, so I go down. I'll try to be brief. It's a long story, but it's worth telling. I get up, and I lean over, and here's Mr. Trump to my left, and there's 1,000 people in the audience, and someone's introduced me, and I said, I bet you folks are wondering why they would ask a senator from Arkansas to introduce Mr. Trump. It's a fair question. I said, I asked the same thing. And I said, their response was, now keep in mind, I don't know Mr. Trump, and I'm having to ad-lib this introduction. I don't know anything to say about the guy. I said, but I was surprised when I heard the answer. The answer for them was that him and I had so much in common, that they had done extensive research, and Mr. Trump and I shared so much. What are you laughing about, Kim?
Hey, I can just envision what it would have been like.
Well,
anyway, go ahead.
And here's the funny part. I get 1,000 people, and they're chuckling out there. And I said, I did research, and I found out we have a lot in common. And at that time, the birther thing was raging with Barack Obama, that he wasn't born in the United States. And the president was leading, or then candidate, was leading that effort. He didn't believe it. So I leaned over the microphone. I said, I did extensive research, and I found out that Mr. Trump and I do have a lot in common. And I leaned over a little closer, and I said, we're both born in America. And when I said that, the place erupted. I wanted to say, and we have birth certificates to prove it, but I didn't want to go. I got up to the edge.
Far.
I didn't jump off.
Yeah.
And then I said, I've done I did extensive research. I said, a state senator in Arkansas makes $15,280 a year. And I said, to my surprise, Mr. Trump makes $15,280 every 27 seconds. So every 27 seconds, we make exactly the same. And I went through a list. I said, most of you don't know, but I own a couple hundred acres in Arkansas. And I said, to my surprise, Mr. Trump owns 200 acres. Downtown Manhattan, but mine's in Arkansas. But just think, we both own 200 acres. This great country we call America. People were having fun. They were laughing. And it dawned on me, I've got to walk by this guy that I really don't know. And he may not think this is funny that we're poking fun at him. And so I conclude, and it was his birthday, and we said happy birthday to him. It was in June. I remember because that was my birthday too. So I walk by, he stands up, and again, he's a little overpowering. He's a big guy. And he put his hand out, and I was just going to shake it as I walked by, trying to get away because I didn't know what he was. I thought he might hit me because we had people loosened up. And he shook my hand. He pulled me in. He gave me one of those man hug, kind of a man hug. Leaned over, and he said, that could have been the best introduction I've ever had.
Oh, sweet.
2 years later, I get a call or something about time-wise. I get a call and ask me if he'd consider working for him. So they had done a lot of research on me. Tom Cotton was so gracious. John Bozeman, the governor. There were several people. They said, look, this guy's worked his tail off to do the things he does. And I had been involved in energy. And so there's an organization called Southern States Energy Boards. We help set energy policy throughout the southern part of the United States. The president has a seat on that board. So I got to represent him, and it was a highlight of my political career to go work for the president. So that's my story.
Okay.
I obviously thought I'd be around another 4 years. It didn't happen. Come home. I thought there's more to this, and more gas left in my tank, so to speak. And I knew there's some things in Secretary of State's office that could be made better.
And you want to spend your time in the Secretary of State emptying your tank, as they say. So I got about 9 minutes. Let's empty the tank really good. So if you go into the Secretary of State's office, you mentioned something a while ago. You want people that think like you think. How does Eddie Joe Williams think as a Secretary of State?
I can tell you exactly. It's 100% accurate, number one, in voting integrity.
So with all the laws that we passed this last time around, do you feel that we're better off than where we were, or you paid attention to that?
Absolutely. And here's the one that concerns me. There was one law that didn't pass, and that was voter registration online.
Right.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Secretary Thurston endorsed that. That concerns me. Anything you do online for voter is suspect. I led the effort, debated Senator Chesterfield about online voting, and long before it become an issue. It scares the poodle out of me. If we can shut down a gas line on the oil pipeline on the East Coast, if we can hack into the Pentagon's website, on and on and on. If we can matter of fact, there's one in Arkansas. I think it's up around Van Buren or somewhere where they just malware came in and shut their system down.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted
took hostage.
Yeah.
Yep.
If they can do that, they can do it our voting systems. Secretary said something the other day that really concerned me, and I heard the Democrats on TV say the same thing when we were debating this H.R. 1. We know what H.R. 1 is in their effort to pass that. But he told me, and he said it 2 or 3 times, he wants to make voting easier but harder to cheat. I want to tell you, I'm going to take a position. It's a hard position. It's not. It can't make it any easier than what it is today. You show up, you got an ID, you give it to them, and you vote. That's it. If you're shut in, if you have needs, if you're out of town, you can do an absentee, and there's checks and balances for that. But to support drop boxes and all the things that H.R. 1 is to make it easier, it's a real genuine concern for me. We have a system that has worked, and it's worked for 200 plus years, 240 something years, and it will need some adjusting along the way. And here's the difference between him and I. Those bills came from the legislators. Most of those bills did. John Thurston should have been standing front and saying, here's the bills that we need to pass. Here's the ones I'm going to support, and been down there and testify. I don't think that ever happened one time during the session.
H.R. 1, if that was to go through, of course, earlier this week, the Democrats tried to do a filibuster.
But it's not over with.
It ain't over. Never think that your enemy quits.
That's right.
But if H.R. 1 was to go through, I would hope that with what we have in place, and I don't know how it would play out. I'm not a lawyer, not a legal expert, but I would hope at least with what we have on the books now that we were successful in getting through before, would at least create a legal challenge of state versus federal rights.
Senator, I'm 100% agreeing with you, but we all know that federal law trumps state law.
I know, but
it would give us have a position. But and here's the difference. Me, if I'm Secretary of State, I'm sure Sarah's going to be the governor, whoever the Attorney General is going to be. I promise you this: we'll stand shoulder to shoulder, and we'll go to the mat to fight against H.R. 1 and everything it stands for.
And I don't think we'd be the only state. And that's, it'd be like a lot of other issues. Whether we win or lose, some things are worth fighting and taking the hill for.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you, go through the top things you would do if you're Secretary of State that you feel like sharing.
I first and foremost, I'll go to work every day. You won't have to wonder where I'm at, what I'm doing. Number two is, and it's just as important, it's the second largest staffing agency in the state government. As I said before, when John Thurston took office, there was about 130 employees. Today, there's 157, I think, is what's in there. I looked the number before I left. 156 employees. So that's the difference between 30 and 56 in little over 2 years. I'll take a hard look at every process that we have. The same thing I did when I was mayor of Cabot. We were about $1 million in debt when I sat down, and when I left, we had $4 million in the bank. It's because my department heads had to sit down, and we had to methodically go through every process that we performed. We'll do the same thing. I will take a hard look at the protect the integrity of the Capitol. There's a whole show on what happened the night that the Capitol was attacked. And
you're talking about the Arkansas one.
I'm talking about the Arkansas.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Arkansas Capitol. The night that they burnt the flag on the Capitol grounds, they wrote graffiti on the building. They spun donuts. All the while, we had 100 state troopers and game wardens ready to move 2 blocks away, but Secretary of State wouldn't make that call. Actually, the police chief had to call the governor, and when he talked to the governor said, "It's a peaceful demonstration. I can't do anything for you." And Chief Hedden said, "Governor, they're about to burn the building down." He said, "I've been told it's a peaceful demonstration." And within 5 minutes, 100 of Arkansas's finest rolled up, and within just a matter of minutes, it was over with. But the damage was extensive. And I'll commit to your listeners and people of the state of Arkansas, I'll stand shoulder to shoulder. I'll stand shoulder to shoulder and do everything I can to protect that building. I built a monument. Anyone's welcome to go out there and look at the Medal of Honor recipients monument.
Gold Star.
No, Medal of Honor recipients.
Medal
Gold
Honor,
Star
yeah.
too. That's a whole
Yeah.
story in itself. I led the effort on that. But if you walk down, there's a Medal of Honor recipient. It's fell in disarray. It's shameful that we would allow a monument on the Capitol grounds to fall, especially for Medal of Honor recipients. And the Secretary of State said he's not responsible to repair it. I know better than that. They basically own them. We paid $50,000. We built a Gold Star Family Monument for perpetual care. He's told the Marines that they've got to raise their own money to repair a monument on the Capitol grounds. That is totally unacceptable. These are people who defend this country and made it great. I served in the military, both Army and the National Guard. So I understand what a family goes through when they lose a loved one and what America's all about. So I'm excited. I'd love to spend 4 hours with you. I know you only have an hour show, and the second half is for Mr. Thurston. But I'll
Okay.
start early and stay late every day.
Okay. All right. This is the Kim Hammer Show. You've been listening to Eddie Joe Williams, who's the candidate, State Editor Eddie Joe Williams, as I mentioned a while ago. they say once you're a senator, you're always referred to as a senator. So Senator Eddie Joe Williams, who's running for as a candidate for the Secretary of State here in the state of Arkansas. When we come back from the break here on the Kim Hammer Show, we're going to have Secretary John Thurston on to finish out the second half of the hour. So I hope that you'll stick around, and we will be interviewing him on the second half. Eddie Joe, thank you for coming in today.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you very much. All right, to a break, and then we'll be back. Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you for joining me here on 101.1 FM, The Answer. My previous guest was Senator Eddie Joe Williams. If you've been listening, you know that. But if you're just tuning in, Senator Eddie Joe Williams, former senator here in the state of Arkansas, running for the Secretary of State position. But now joining me on the second half of the show is our current Secretary of State, John Thurston. And John, I know you're on the road today, so I appreciate you taking time to call into the Kim Hammer Show. And thank you for joining me.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Hey, first of all, just in case somebody doesn't know anything about your family background, because I know you got a great family, do us a favor and just give people a little bit of personal perspective about your family, if you would.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah. Hear you fine.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm a native Arkansan. Grew up in Saline County. I still live in Saline County. Married to my wife, Joanna. We have 5 kids in all. Of course, 4 of them are they're pretty well grown, and went to high school at Sheridan, and wound up being in the ministry for 13 years, prior to running for land commissioner in 2010. And if you would have asked me, 15 years ago what I would be doing today, I would tell you ministry. And went to Bible college, thought that's what I was, going to pursue, and which was, and then ran for Commissioner of State Lands. And it's been an absolute honor. Of course, I still consider this ministry. This is still serving people, and it's been an absolute honor. And, of course, Secretary of State now for over 3 years has been the most challenging and also the most rewarding thing I've ever really done in my whole life. So that's just a little bit of background.
Just for people that may not know, what are the responsibilities of the Secretary of State? Go through the list of things that you're responsible for as Secretary of State.
Sure. Secretary of State is the chief election officer for the state, so elections are top priority of the function of the office. The Business Commercial Service Division, where corporations, LLC, nonprofits, is where you file to do business in the state of Arkansas. I call it the on and off ramp for those who want to do business in Arkansas, whether it's a local business out of state. It doesn't matter. If you're going to do business here, you have to file in the office. So that's a lot of work there. That's almost an agency of its own, if you will. It's a pretty big operation. The Capitol grounds, the facilities, the grounds, the Capitol Police is also under the Secretary of State. So, it's a lot to do. The good news is, when pertaining to elections, the Heritage Foundation just released a ranking of all the states in the nation, and Arkansas ranked number 4 in election integrity. So very, very proud of actually what the legislatures have done over the years, and particularly this last General Assembly on some of the legislation that helped bring us up in that ranking. And so, that's the 3 main parts of the Secretary of State.
Let me ask you, when you came into office, compare from when you came into office to where you are now, and what would you say are some of the improvements that you've made, and what do you feel are still some areas that you need to work on or that need to be worked on as Secretary of State?
Yeah, so being chief election officer, elections is at the top. And when I became Secretary of State, there was a lot of conversation about Russian interference, cybersecurity, and those types of issues. So that's what I was facing coming in. And so for the first time in state history, the Secretary of State's office, we have a cybersecurity specialist on staff. For the first time in state history, the Department of Homeland, the FBI, they were with us there at the Capitol on election night during the primary and the presidential election, and they were in communication with their counterparts across the nation, monitoring any type of cyber attacks and those sorts of things. So that communication and that relationship is better than ever, and it's shown to be valuable, especially during the times that we're in. And my goal is to make it easy to vote, but hard to cheat. Harder to cheat than it is easier to vote. A lot of the folks on the far left, especially areas like California and Colorado and Oregon, they want to make it so easy to vote that it actually creates a system that is easier to cheat as well. And so that's some of the things we've done. Also, for the first time in state history, we have all 75 counties on the same election equipment. Secretary Martin began this process, and when I took office, there were still 21 counties that needed to receive the new equipment, and we were able to accomplish that. And thankfully, before the presidential election last year, because, I'm getting my years mixed up. We're already in 22.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But the presidential election, we had record turnout, and it was during a pandemic. So that was very timely. We had a great election here in Arkansas. And also, when the pandemic first came on the scene, there was a lot of talk, how the elections would look. Are we even going to have an election? Those words were actually uttered out of some folks' mouths, even at the national level. And so we began preparing for that election during the pandemic. And one thing that we did, we sent out surveys to all 75 counties, the county clerks, asking them what their needs would be. And they all responded saying that they would need help with PPE, increased expense with postage and printing and those types of things. And so during that time, we purchased $1 million worth of PPE, and during the month of August, we distributed that to all 75 counties, and we had all hands on deck. I mean, we had folks from the grounds crew, the cafe, helping deliver those products to all the 75 counties, and hats off to all the election officials during that time and our team. That we had a very successful election, even in the middle of a pandemic and record turnout.
Let me ask you on a federal level, the federal when it comes to Congress and what they're wanting to do, they're wanting to come in and take over the elections. As far as your view, your position on that, and what would you do to resist that temptation, knowing that you're in a limited capacity as Secretary of State when dealing with decisions that are being made at the federal level, but talk about just the attempt of the federal government to take over the elections, and as a Secretary of State, what would you be able to do? What would you be willing to do in order to stop that from happening, if anything at all could be done?
Right. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what has me worked up this week and last week. That legislation has failed a couple of times, HR 1, HR 4, but they have put this election reform legislation inside some other bills. You know how things go in D.C. You try to hide things and get them passed. But I sent a letter to Schumer and McConnell in stating my opposition to this. And the thing is, I just mentioned we ranked number 4 in the nation, according to Heritage Foundation in election integrity. Well, the federalization of elections would actually undermine everything that we have done in Arkansas over the years, and even in recent years, the last General Assembly. It would undermine everything we have done to even get to the point where we could be considered number 4 in the area of election integrity. And this bill, if I have time, I could just give you just a handful of the highlights of what it does. It would override state voter ID laws. It would prohibit IDs or signatures for absentee ballots. Same-day voter registration would become legal and make it impossible for county officials to verify, the validity of voters. Automatic voter registration, online voter registration would become mandatory for the states. The states couldn't decide that for themselves. Felons' voting rights would be restored as soon as they leave prison. States would be required to have drop boxes for absentee ballots with no secure protocols. And I could go on and on. Non-citizens would be allowed to vote. And here's something else. D.C. bureaucrats would have the authority to veto any state laws regarding elections. And so all of our federal delegation, the congressmen and the senators, they are all in opposition to this. But this is an example of what the protest was about on January the 6th. We have focused everything on the breach of the Capitol, which I do not condone or support any of those type of actions. But the event was because people were upset with how they felt the election went. And what's interesting to me is that the very thing that some of these states had issues with, ballot harvesting and those sorts of things, I don't know if you want to say it's ironic, but it's very disturbing that this legislation actually okays what we were seeing in some of these other states. And so to say that this fight is over, it is not. I don't even think we've even gotten started yet. And I think that's why it's very important that we obviously send good conservative folks to Washington, but also we help other states make sure they get good conservative representation up in Washington. So, yes, you're right. I am limited on what I can do personally. I can send letters. I can call. I can lock arms with the other Republican secretaries of states and help. But I tell you, it's a fight nationwide.
All right. Which this past week, there were 3 of y'all in the race. My understanding, Mark Lowry announced up at the Washington Republican Party that he's no longer in the race. So we're down to you and Eddie Joe are running. And so let me ask you about a couple of things that have been pointed out. You being in office, you've been in office before as land commissioner, transitioned over to Secretary of State. So, when you're in office, there are things that are thrown your way as far as what people think you could have been done better
Sure.
on. So
Sure,
let me throw a few things at you and give you a chance to respond to them if you're okay with that. You good?
Oh yeah, you bet.
All right.
You bet.
So you brought up the protest on January 6th up in D.C., but we've had our own problem down here in Arkansas, which resulted in the state police being called in order to get things under control. I want you to speak to that and just talk about that situation from the position, because you're the responsible one for the Capitol grounds, as you mentioned, one of your areas that you're responsible for. So I just want to give you a platform to talk about that night and the events as they occurred. And I've got about 10 minutes, I think, left in the show. I got a couple other questions for you, so just want to make you mindful how much time I got left. But go ahead and
Okay.
just open mic for you to talk about that night and just share your perspective.
Sure, I appreciate that, and I apologize. I'm sitting in this vehicle, and the radio just popped on for no reason. Let me. Yes, during that time, and and that was the challenge. That was probably the most challenging year that any Secretary of State could have asked for. Record turnout election, pandemic, and then we had the protest up at the Capitol. And prior to all that went on surrounding George Floyd, when these protests began happening across the nation, I sat down with our team and said we need to be prepared for this, and it's likely to be on our steps. And so preparations had been made leading up to that. And before I get too far into that, I do want to say that the Capitol Police now, they have more training and they're more equipped than ever before. Obviously, you can learn a lot by going through certain situations like that. But the first night was the roughest night of the protest. I think it went on for about 4 nights, if I'm not mistaken. But the first night was the roughest night. And I'll be honest, since folks want to make this a talking point, especially individuals who were not there, want to make it a talking point. And when I left that day, the former chief of police told me as I was walking out, he said, "Don't worry about it. Go home, go to bed, eat dinner," giving me the impression that everything was under control. Well, later that night, as I was visiting with the chief on the phone, of course, every night that week, things got bad and went south in a hurry. And we could be here for a while talking about all the things that happened. And fortunately, the state police were on standby, and they did make it there, and they did de-escalate the situation before anyone was hurt. Now, that's the good news about the whole event that took place that week, or the whole situation. No one was hurt. But when that first night, when they began doing donuts on the Capitol grounds, our Capitol Police went out to address that, and they were met with, bricks and water bottles and different things, and they were had to retreat back into the building. So I want to commend the officers that were there that night. They did the best they can, and I do want to say again, no one was hurt. However, that night when the chief called, he said, "We need help," and then he was pretty distraught. And I said, "Well, I need to call the governor." So I called the governor that night and tried to explain to him the situation. And I told him, I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, you need to talk to the chief. He's on the ground." And I shared the governor's number with the chief. He called the governor, explained the situation, and things were, became under control shortly after, once state police were able to, be on the grounds. So I don't know fully what everyone or whoever is saying what went wrong, or, trying to say that something wasn't handled correctly. But I will say, as much preparation was made that could have been made, without going into, I guess, personnel related issues. But I will say this, the Capitol Police now are more equipped and more trained than they have ever been in the history of this state. And I'm happy to come on at another time and explain all that has gone on in that department.
Well, actually, we gave appropriations, if I remember right, a couple of years ago that would allow for them to be trained, you correct me if I'm wrong, almost to SWAT level, as far as the training that now is required for them to go through to deal with such a situation like that. Is my recollection correct on that?
Yes, you appropriated some funds also to increase the number of officers
That's right.
that we have. It didn't take us long that week. I tell you, there were so many overtime hours that the Capitol Police went through that week that we quickly discovered we needed more manpower. But yeah, I mean, I was having lunch with one of our officers a few months ago, and he said, I never thought when I took this job that I would be issued riot gear. And so now, we have riot gear, we have the rubber bullets, we have the tear gas, all of that stuff has to be, you have to be trained on and certified. We have, higher powered weapons that we've never had before. And the communication chain that's in place now with the state police and the National Guard and city of Little Rock and North Little Rock is in place now like never before. I'll say the best way to give you an example, we have a light switch now. We have a switch that we can flip, and that we are prepared more than ever for the future.
Okay. One of the other points was about the growth of the office, number of positions that are in the office, and who's in the offices, that you hold. Any comment you want to respond to on that?
No, I'm not sure what that is. I mean, as far as the increase in positions, that was the Capitol Police, but that was the only increase that I'm aware of.
Okay. So as looking to the future as Secretary of State, what would be your goals if reelected to the position? You get back in the office, what are going to be the things that you're going to be working on?
Sure. Above all, fulfill my statutory responsibility. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call coming in. That is the main thing. When you take these offices, you don't get to set the rules. You don't get to make the laws. You don't get to define your job. The job description is set. So the main thing that an individual does is do their job and fulfill their responsibility. So that is my goal number one. And no one can look back except maybe pinprick a few little things, can say that anything is broken. There's nothing that is broken. And so my administration has done an outstanding job. But some of the areas that we have to focus on, the Business Commercial Service Division, the system there, the software there, all of that helps service all the corporations, nonprofits, that is going to have to be upgraded, and we're in the process of doing so. Actually, we've got to have funding most of all, and that's going to be a pretty hefty price tag. Also, the financial reporting system where candidates and PACs and those entities do their candidate filing and their financial reports, that is going to have to be revamped, rebuilt, or basically overhauled. And those, we just sent out the RFPs I guess it was earlier this month. So that process is underway. So we hope to be able to tackle that in the very near future. And just want to do our job and focus on election integrity and make sure the county clerks have what they need. And I know that's probably not a sensational answer, but those are the main areas. A lot of the programs that we have and the systems that we have in the IT world to help serve Arkansas better.
All right, I've got about 2 minutes left. What would be your last words you want the general public to know about John Thurston, Secretary of State?
Well, it's been an absolute honor. Just this Thursday, I received the endorsement from Mike Huckabee, our former governor, which I'm so grateful for. Also have the endorsement from Senator Tom Cotton, and those gentlemen understand and recognize the job that my administration has done. Also, we opened a satellite office up in Northwest Arkansas to help serve the business community there. 40% of the entities that we serve in the Business Commercial Service Division are in Northwest Arkansas. So we recognized the growth in that area and opened up that office, and it has proven to serve the state as a whole better. As Northwest Arkansas grows and prospers, I believe we all do. So that was something very positive that we were able to accomplish. But I guess I would say this. In this particular race, I respect everyone's experiences, backgrounds, expertise, and those things. But in this race, I am the only candidate that has actually run a constitutional office, and I have done so very well. And I don't think, or I think that anyone that would debate that or argue that, they're going to be really grasping to prove that. So I do ask for everyone's vote. It would be an absolute honor to serve one more term.
All right. You've been listening here on the Kim Hammer Show to the two candidates. There were three, but one has dropped out. We're down to two on the Republican ticket. One would be Senator Eddie Joe Williams, which you heard on the first half of the show. The second one is the current Secretary of State, John Thurston. I appreciate, John, you coming on the air. I know you're on the road traveling, and I appreciate you probably had to stop on the side of the road to hold a signal. So I appreciate the time that you've given, and I appreciate Eddie Joe Williams for coming on the first half of the show as well, and we hope that this has been informative to you as the general public. I want to just say this before we get off the air today. I encourage you to go up to my website, which is thekimhammershow.com. You can stay in touch with some current information, some articles I think that are of interest to you, especially if you're a solid conservative. There is one on there that I want to draw your attention to because I referred to it last week, and that is an article entitled Pro-Life in Arkansas, A Different Perspective. A lot of conversation around the recent time that we had in the past special session. We've got the fiscal session coming up. I just want to make sure that you're knowledgeable. I told you that I'd get a letter up on my website, and I did. And so if you haven't seen that, you can go up there to the KimHammerShow.com website and take a look at the article entitled Pro-Life in Arkansas, A Different Perspective. Thank you for listening to the Kim Hammer Show. We'll have some other candidates on next Saturday. We'll probably be doing this until the primaries are over, until we run out of candidates, which this year doesn't look like we got a problem, which is a good thing. So thank you for listening to Kim Hammer Show. Have a great Saturday afternoon.